How's it going? And welcome to my guide of Chapter 2 of Tomb of Annihilation, a 5th edition module. Chapter 2 covers the sprawling, dense, and dangerous jungles of Chult, spanning hundreds and hundreds of miles in all which various ways. Chapter 2 is the bulk of the book of Tomb of Annihilation, and thus needs to be taken into serious consideration when running this adventure. Before I get into the fine details of Chapter 2, I must warn you that there will be spoilers, and this is for DMs only who wish to run this module. Alright, now that the players are gone, let's get this started. The only way I can really show this off to you is by showing off the map of Chult, of course. This place is massive, and as you can tell, there is dozens of named places, and those will be the set pieces of what makes this adventure memorable. Your players trekking through these dangerous jungles, meanwhile starting off in that tiny little top there of Port 9 Zaru. So the intro to Chapter 2 is very simple here. We have it basically explaining to your players, to you anyway, how your players might venture into the jungles. That is entirely left up to the party. There is no one clear and set way how to get into the jungles of Chult. More often than not, of course, people just simply walk right out of Port 9 Zaru into the jungle itself. You can, however, do various other things, such as taking a canoe and going up the rivers, or hiring a ship out of Port 9 Zaru and going around in the waters and making a landfall somewhere else. It is entirely up to your players, and how you guide your players into those actions is entirely up to you. Adventure is waiting for them, though. How they get there is irrelevant. It's just when they get there is the fun bits. So, before I actually start going into the actual named places of Chapter 2, I must get into what makes Chapter 2 unique in that it is a hex crawl. This is the first air quote hardcore hex crawl for 5th edition, and you really need to consider the implications of that. And to basically give you some information here, it tells you that one hex equals 1 day of travel. It tells you how you should track them. It tells you how you should navigate through the jungles of Chult. It tells you how to deal with dehydration, deals with dead characters, all this stuff. So, first things first, getting into travel. 1 hex equals 1 day of travel. Pretty standard stuff. Very easy to track. You moved 10 hexes. All right, go ahead and subtract 10 rations. You subtract 10 times however many gold you owe to the guide. You subtract 10 amounts of water, etc., etc. Very simple stuff. Next up, the navigation. So, if your players chose not to take a guide, which is very could lead to disaster, they need to start making survival checks here. And that is when the funny bits start happening. Your players will be moving through the jungles, and you will tell them where they think they moved, because on the player's map, which I'll go ahead and show you here, it'll take a billion years to load because Roll20 does take a hot minute to load here. But as you can tell, the hexes, as they're moving, you can say, oh, the players moved here. But in reality, they're moving somewhere else because they are getting lost. Getting lost is a big deal in this game. And if they they could think that they should be right on top of a landmark, and you're just telling them, yeah, you don't see any of that landmark. So that can lead to some really fun stuff. The thing about that is, there is some ways the players can try and mitigate that. Of course, they can try and backtrack. They can rely on certain racial features, or they can, climb a tree. They can rely on maybe there's a ranger in the party and the rangers can't get lost, etc., etc. Dehydration. So food and water in real life is a big deal. However, you never really think about it too much in an actual adventure. This game, it tells you that you should consider, things such as food and water When it's hot out, they need to drink more water, etc., etc. And the water is dangerous to drink. You can't just, get the river water because it could be diseased and all that. A cure for dead characters. So, in most D&D adventures, you die, and if you're a gracious DM and give your players lots of diamonds, they can get brought back no problem. However, in this game, that's the whole crux of the adventure: is that people are dying and can't be brought back, and the people that have been brought back are slowly dying. So, if you want to add that element of being brought back because you love these characters so much, you or the players, of course, you can direct them to one of the places which we'll be going over fairly soon, Mbala, where they can be resurrected. Diseases is its own little panel here, and in addition to the diseases that you can find in the Dungeon Master's Guide, there's also some other fun ones like Mad Monkey Fever, Shivering Sickness, and Throat Leeches. Who doesn't love a good pair of throat leeches? Those can, of course, add to various hardcore roleplay elements of the game and cause your players to think a bit more tactically. And lastly, random encounters. So, random encounters, very simple. You roll 3d20 per day, and on a 16 or higher, they get a new encounter. And once that happens, you simply roll up an encounter on a D100 table, and you reference that to where they are. Really fun stuff. Um, so yeah, before I get into any of this other fun stuff, I'm gonna go ahead and say this is where every single DM that has ran this module differs. Some want to keep this game to the hardcore element that is hardcore old school hex crawling. Some people want just pulpy, getting to point A to point B and don't think about the minutia of, having to keep track of food and water. How you do it, entirely up to you. I would strongly suggest that you talk to your players openly before even running this module and discuss how you want to run the hex crawling. Do your players want the hardcore element of keeping track of food and water? Do your players want to deal with icky things like disease and all that? Heck, do your players want an even harder challenge? Because in 5e, it really doesn't matter how much damage you take, because if you go ahead and sleep and wake up the next day, all of your resources are back to normal. So the hardcore players might want extended, sleep schedules, maybe short rest 8 hours, long rest a week, or maybe they flat out can't even get long rest out in the jungles. They have to be holed up in somewhere, whether in Port Nanzaru or Camp Vengeance or many of the other, secure locations. I personally can't recommend a single way to do it because every single group is entirely different. You might want a hardcore experience, but your players might not. Your players might want a hardcore experience, but you think that it'll get in the way of time. It's really something you need to discuss. And like I said before, that is where every single person that I've talked to has played and ran this module differently. There is no right or wrong way. There's simply the way that is best for your group. Simple as that. So, with that out of the way, next up, Artus Cimber. I alluded to this in Chapter 1, and there is, in fact, in this little thing here of Chapter 2, where's Artus Cimber? So, first off, let's get into who Artus Cimber is. Artus Cimber is this man in particular. He looks like a pretty generic human, nothing too fancy. He's a little bit older. He's got some nice looking features. Maybe looking like yeah, just not a really standout guy. The thing about him, though, is that he is in possession of the Ring of Winter. The Ring of Winter is this magnificent, destructive artifact. This thing is super powerful. And unfortunately, people know that, one, Artus has it, and two, that Artus is in these jungles. So, yeah, as we can see here, it gives you some very special effects here. One, the ring is sentient and it's totally evil. We'll get to that in a moment. 2, it gives you non-detection. You can't scry for this guy. He's impossible to scry for. 3, this guy's not aging. He's been this age for quite some time, and if he takes it off, he's going to probably catch up and age and die. Think Raiders of the Lost Ark. Someone getting aged rapidly, kind of thing. Cold immunity, pretty dope. No cold damage. Not that you're dealing with too much cold damage in this particular adventure, mind you, but still. But also the really fun effects. You can create a little temperate area of cold. You can use it to cast certain spells, and they're all flavored to be ice. And you can also create ice animals. So some really cool shit that this guy can do. Other properties, um, basically the frost giants want this thing because they believe that it's going to freeze over the world, and that's something some of the frost giants want. If you're familiar with the other modules, which I will be reviewing over some time, the module Storm King's Thunder deals with a bit of that, and you actually meet one of Artus's descendants. So the ring's also indestructible. You can't just smash this thing. You can't throw it into a vat of lava. It's very unique stuff. So what makes Artus so special is really the fact that he is just some guy who's in possession of this evil artifact that other people want. He himself is not an evil guy. He's an upright standing guy. One could say that he's neutral good. And he wants to keep the ring out of evildoers' hands, and he also has a side objective. He basically his wife, uh, right here, his beloved Alisanda, disappeared with the city of Mesro, and he's looking for a way to basically find his wife. Accompanying Artus Cimber in all these trials and tribulations is Dragonbait. Dragonbait, awesome name for an awesome guy. Dragonbait is a Sorial. You probably don't recognize that race because it is a very rare and ancient race. They are thought to not be really existent, and some people think that he's maybe some type of dragonborn or maybe some other type of entity. People aren't really sure what he is. However, it's made worse by the fact that Dragonbait cannot talk. Dragonbait can only communicate using sense and over time, Artus knows a bit more how to interact with Dragonbait. However, that can present some, very funny roleplay elements with regards of how does Dragonbait talk. Dragonbait's also a super paladin. He's not just any, mundane little weak paladin. He is in possession of a holy avenger. So, if you have some evil players on your hands, and they see that there's this guy who's got this magic ring, and they see this other guy who's got this, +3 sword. An evil party might try and jump on this. However, with the combination of Artus and Dragonbait, they can pretty easily deal with most parties, if ran correctly, of course. Higher level parties could definitely get the jump on these guys. But more often than not, a good aligned party is going to interact with Artus Cimber. So where is Artus Cimber? The module does not give any exact determination on where he is. That is entirely up to you. And more so to the point, if you don't want to have him involved in the adventure at all, you do not have to. This book gives several places on where he might be found. Camp Rightous, exploring the ruins. Heart of Ubtao, spying on the Red Wars at Jahag Anchorage, captured by pirates and trying to free them, etc., etc. So, how you introduce Artus Cimber and Dragonbait into your group's dynamics can be interesting. I would recommend that you don't have them as a permanent fixture to a party because, quite frankly, they outshine the party, and that's just not fun for players to get outshined by NPCs. I would have them as, fun, maybe reoccurring entities that, seem to just always keep on bumping into them. Or maybe, your friends or your PCs are in a terrible fight. You rolled up a dinosaur or a T-Rex, and they're about to get their butts kicked, and then Artus Cimber shows up and saves the day. You can introduce this in a number of ways, and like I said before, I would recommend probably not having them as a full-time mixture into the party, but they certainly add a lot of fun roleplay elements in regards of as soon as Artus is with the party for long enough, that's when the party is going to get stalked by other entities like the Zentarum, like the Red Wizards, like the Frost Giants, etc., etc. Really fun stuff. Also, as you might be reading here, Zandala. Zandala was one of the people that has a quest in Chapter 1, and she is looking for Artus Cimber because she's totally going to try and cast a spell on him, steal that spell, and fly away. So, really, really fun roleplay stuff. Also, it's probably recommended that Artus would not be, let's say, dumb enough to show back up to Port Nyanzaru. He needs to be staying in the jungles. So if your players are regular people that go out into the jungles and come back to, spill their rewards, Artus would not be joining them back in Port Nyanzaru. So there's that. Yeah, the fun diseases. And finally, we are going to get into the named places of the jungles of Chult. So this is going to take an incredibly long time, and it's probably going to be split up into 2 videos. With that being said, let's go ahead and get started. These are in alphabetical order, and I will, have timestamps to all of these. They are not representative at all by where they are on the map. So, first things first. Man, why am I all the way down here? I must have been looking at some fun stuff. The Aldani Basin. So right here. Aldani Basin, it's where the river Star ends up. It is where the river Toth leads to, and it's a nasty swamp. The thing that makes the Aldani Basin interesting about Chult is that there is people living there that originally were called the Aldani. The Aldani, however, are a cursed people. Long ago, they bled the rivers dry of lobsters, and as retaliation, the god Ubtao transformed all of these people into lobster folk. Let me go ahead and show off a little picture of them. Creepy stuff. Imagine, just walking around a forest and some lobster dude shows up and he's got a human mouth. Creepy AF. However, they're not too challenging. Only +3 to attack, only gets 2 attacks, only challenge rating 1. Not too much health, not really that big of a deal. However, they're not innately evil, mind you. They do. It does say that they try and scare people away, and if that doesn't work out, they try bribing people away. The Aldani don't actually want to interact with too many people. Because they know that they're a bit weaker. They know that they don't want people, stealing, their supplies from them, etc., etc. In addition to that, the Aldani Basin makes for an interesting encounter where, on a clear day, you will see the heart of Ubtao. The heart of Ubtao, which we'll go ahead and get into later, a flying mound of dirt overhead. Ataaz Kahakla, the Gorge of Death. It is a sightseeing place, nothing too fancy about it. Um, you know, yeah, so something I'll get into here is there's a lot of places, a lot of named places here. Not all of them have maps, but they don't really need maps. The Aldani Basin is, just imagine swampland. They don't provide a map for that. Ataaz Kahakla is, beautiful cliff walls that are reefed in coral and bones. So no map there. So now, so naming scheme you'll see coming up here is the Ataazes. The Ataaz is Chultan for a set piece location. Ataaz Kahakla, really just a sightseeing place, nothing really fancy there. Ataaz Muhahaha is where we get into our first actual map. So Ataaz Muhahaha is over now, if I can actually move this thing. It allows you to move from this little area over to this little area, and provides the first map. So Ataaz Muhahaha, the reason why it is named Muhahaha is because there's a whole bunch of monkeys underneath and they laugh. And when they laugh, it is a cacophony of laughs. You also might be seeing that there's a stone golem here. So let's go ahead and explore a bit more into Ataaz Muhahaha. There's a shrine of Ubtao, and there's a massive Chultan warrior wearing a mask that is in the center of this bridge. And as you might note, that this gorge is pretty freaking huge. It's a 100-foot drop. So, uh, one thing that your players may or may not be keyed into is the god Ubtao likes mazes, and he rewards those that trace the path. If your players don't catch on to this, or they do not heed this warning, they will regularly find themselves in trouble in various jungle mishaps. This one here being that if they do not trace the path, the stone golem will animate. Now this stone golem doesn't just try and just beat down and pulverize people. This thing actually wants to throw things down, and unfortunately for most early level parties, a 100-foot drop is a disaster because you take a d6 for every 10 feet you fall. 10d6 is not pretty. That's getting hit by, something harder than a fireball. And theoretically, your players could be getting hit by this at levels, 1, 2, 3, depending on what's going on. In addition to that, underneath, of course, there is hanging vines where the monkeys are, and that could present your players another way of getting past the stone golem. The stone golem doesn't pursue people that go away. It simply goes and resets. And one thing I love about this module is there's regularly these fun little art pieces in the corners here. So I would strongly recommend once you actually, before you show, the battle map, I would recommend showing off this beautiful little set piece right here so that they can get a good idea. And more so that they can get a good idea that the bridge is sadly broken. If they want to get across here, they're going to have to jump, or maybe they're going to have to, use some type of rope or something. How they get across is entirely up to them. All right. Next up, we have Ataaz Yklwazi. Ataaz Yklwazi. There's so many places, so many different named places here. So Ataaz Yklwazi over here around the Valley of Lost Honor. Much like Ataaz Kahakla, Ataaz Yklwazi is just a set piece. It's but instead of it being made of coral and bones, this one is made of obsidian. It does say here that it is protected by patrolling fire newts, and the fire newts we'll get into once we get more into the other things. The only thing really to mention is that there is a whole bunch of fire newts and a red dragon that occupy Hrakamar and the Valley of Lost Honor because it is a desolate and savage place and is dried up. So no map provided, but once again, beautiful set piece. You can tell your players all in vivid description how they see these razor edges and this obsidian and fun stuff. So next up, Bay of Chult. The Bay of Chult is interesting because it actually leads back into the map of Port Nanzaru here. Nothing really going on in the port except for this little fact that there is literally a dragon turtle. A dragon turtle blocks the port and basically extorts people that go through. Let me go ahead and close that. Aramag, the dragon turtle, basically accosts anybody that passes by and tries to get a massive amount of loot. And that could lead to some fun roleplay elements of, if you want to hire a ship, you're going to have to pay for that. Or maybe they don't get told that. Maybe they're expected to have an offering. Because If your players were teleported to Port Nanzaru, they actually wouldn't have a clue about the dragon turtle that's protecting the bay. Everyone else that actually uses the bay would, though. So maybe if they get hired on, or they hire someone on, maybe they just, the employer slips this because they're expected to have this patronage to this dragon turtle. That could lead to some fun moments. The interesting thing, though, is that this dragon turtle airmag has been extorting people for quite some time, and actually doesn't want to actively fight the party. What it does, though, is if you do not pay up, this thing will destroy your ship, at which point sharks will go ahead and try and gobble you up. And if you are, dozens of miles away from land and you're battling sharks, that would certainly spell disaster. Unfortunately, there is no mention of where Air Mag's layer would be. If you, I doubt many groups that are going through this would actually have the opportunity to fight a dragon turtle underwater and trying to get to its lair. But if you want to have a higher level element to this adventure, that's certainly something you should consider adding a lair and adding all the loot that's stolen over all these years. Next up, Camp Rightous. Camp Rightous, the next map that has been provided for us. Once again, it's so hard to navigate these online things sometimes. You gotta zoom in, you gotta click on little things here and there. Camp Rightous, once again, very awesome thing, and totally would recommend that you show off the art before showing off the map here, because this is what they see. They see a statue of a man that with a crocodile on his back embedded into a little plateau area, as well as some ruined tents and pens nearby. Really fun stuff. Camp Righteous was recently occupied by soldiers of the Iron Gauntlet. However, the undead overran their encampment and they retreated and headed further downriver where they reinforced. What this provides for your players is the potential to ransack the place a little bit. They didn't leave too much. However, if attentive players will be able to find that in one of the latrines, sadly, someone fell down there, a dead Templar, and had had some gemstones on their body. That's really much all the loot that they'll find in the tents. However, the real loot is not the tiny amount of gemstones. The real loot is from the house of the man and the crocodile. So this is where the puzzles start rolling in. This is where the roleplay starts rolling in. If your players have a guide or someone from Chult, they will know the story of the man and the crocodile. To basically give you a little recap, or the lowdown real quick, is the crocodile tricked this man into carrying him, and the man now has to carry this crocodile on his back forever and all time. If you give this little expositional story of how the statue came to be, more often than not, your players are going to think, "Wow, that's some neat, fun backstory to why this statue is here," and adds to the lore of the world and all that. However, it's really a tie-in to the puzzles. You see, this thing is actually really deadly. For how small it is, it's only 1, 2, 3, 4. It's only 5 little things that they got to come across. Doesn't sound like that big of a deal, except at early levels, it's probably expected that your players are going to be levels 1, 2, 3, maybe even 4 when they come across this thing, because it's located so close to the jungles of Chult, or to Port Nanzaru, that they'll come here early. It is incredibly deadly, though. Your players, this is a great introduction to to Tomb of Annihilation, because it is deadly. So the first things first is there's a concealed pit trap. 20-foot fall, taking 2d6 damage. Not that big of a deal, right? Next up is the blade traps, though. And the blade traps, when they walk across it, all of a sudden blades jut out of the walls, dealing a d10 of damage each. And there's 4 of them, meaning that if your player runs through real quick, they're going to get sliced to ribbons. Very bad stuff. Next up, we have the puzzle floor. So a little grid section here. This is where it's going to trip up both players and DMs. There's really no amazing way to provide a top-down view of this map because of how this puzzle is located. As you can tell here, there's a little, grid section here, but the grid section also aligns the walls. And basically your players, what they see in front of them is a wall and a 7-foot high ledge, and they had so realistically they wouldn't even be able to see this standing straight. They'd have to climb up there and go up there, as well as the next one as well. So what makes the puzzle floor so deadly? If they step on a tile, then fire shoots out of the walls, and the fire does 4d10 points of damage. Already 22 points of damage on average right there. That's really scary early on as well. And the creme de la creme here is, of course, the puzzle door itself. If they circumnavigate all these puzzles, they find themselves in front of a door with no obvious way to open it. If they touch the door, they are hit with a Thunderwave spell. Thunderwave spell is not that big of a deal. It's only 2d8 thunder damage. That's not the real issue, though. The real issue is that if they fail the con save, they are blown back onto the floor below, and they're going to set off the trap yet again. So if they fail, they're in a world of hurt, and I can't tell you how many players have either come close to dying or flat out died because of this one little trick. So how do your players navigate this little trap here? It's all located in C here, 16C. So the tiled pattern has a very unnoticeable glow. Your players have to actually, investigate the area around, and they can discover that if certain tiles are pressed, they are able to go through and with no harm done, and more importantly, open up the door. Because unless they do the puzzle, the door can't activate. Uh, of course, many players are going to try and circumnavigate all this by either walking along the wall or trying to throw someone up here. However they try and get to the door, that's all irrelevant if they do not do the puzzle. And lastly, this leads to the treasury here. The bones are a bit misgiving. The bones aren't of dead people. The bones are of dinosaurs that were thrown in here a while ago. The real trap is this staircase. This staircase is massive, and every couple of steps, 3, 10, 17, the 23rd step, all of them call down lightning, doing 5d8 thunder damage if you step across them. And once again, just adding to the absolute disparity of this puzzle. However, the reward is magnificent. The reward is an alchemy jug. For those of you that don't know what an alchemy jug is, let me go ahead and search for it real quick. The alchemy jug is a pretty awesome item. It's this jug with a whole bunch of quartz on it. But what's really interesting is that it produces acid, poison, beer, honey, mayonnaise, oil, vinegar, water fresh, water salt, and wine. Meaning that if you are playing this game as a hardcore element, then this is a way to alleviate that. If your players are, marking up their water, then getting this thing certainly helps out because it can, they can dip some food resources into this thing, but more importantly, some water resources with this thing. So, why is the story irrelevant again? Or relevant again? Well, all those dangerous traps, if they, they just simply walk across this pit, if they simply walk across this, they simply walk here, walk there. All of that is irrelevant if they carry someone on their back. I can't tell you how many of my players and many other players I've heard of kick themselves for not doing this sooner. All you need do is simply piggyback someone all across this, and everything is honky-dory, peachy, no traps kickoff. If you are a cruel DM, then I would, then you'd probably, got to keep a straight face, a straight voice, and make sure to not tip them off if they say anything to that regard of, hey, maybe we should, like I'll carry you or something. Uh, but if if your players are smart enough, or it just happens to come them by sheer dumb luck, then let them have it. 'Cause that is what is interesting about this puzzle. That it can be easily solved by just listening to the story and following along with that path. All right. So with Camp Righteous done, we're going to move on to our next area. And once again, clicking on the wrong thing. Camp Vengeance, the place downstairs. All right. Camp Vengeance. Once the Order of the Iron Gauntlet decided to abandon Camp Righteous because the undead were tearing the place up, they needed to move somewhere, and they decided to go down a little bit deeper, but this time actually reinforce their surrounding, and thus leads us to Camp Vengeance. Another mapped settlement. This one does not have any interesting little corner map here, or art here, but it doesn't really need it. Pretty cut and dry. It's simply a walled fortification with a trench and stakes sticking out. And the thing about this is this leads to amazing roleplay elements here. In Chapter 1, there was a quest to bring Undril Silvertusk, a member of the Iron Gauntlet, who basically needs to arrive here and deliver orders to the commander. The commander being Niles Breakbone. The roleplay element here is the fact that Niles Breakbone is a military commander who is used to planes. He's used to plans working out. He's used to battle lines and order and constantly having his supplies and all that. He is not used to the jungle. The jungles are tearing his soldiers apart. The soldiers are falling to disease, to the sicknesses, to the constant undead fighting them, to the constant other various factors hitting them, the grung, the batiri, the veggie pygmies, all constantly harassing his units, and of course all the dinosaurs along the way. And to that degree, once you arrive, or once your players arrive, Niles Breakbone commands that the players deliver a whole bunch of injured soldiers back to Port Nyanzaru. Things can get really combative here. I've ran this encounter multiple times, of course, and every single time it goes completely differently. Some are happy to, help the good fight. Some of them are happy to get the soldiers back home where they can rest up and do some R&R. Some of them are a little bit, annoyed by the fact that they have to return to Port Nyanzaru so soon, and some of them are straight up combative and do not want to work with the Iron Gauntlet. It really comes down to how you handle Niles Breakbone. Niles Breakbone is not an evil guy, but he's clearly, he's a lawful good guy. It's just that he really wants help. And he figures that the best way to get help is basically press ganging you into doing so. If you brought Undril along, Undril can try and smooth things over here. But really, I would recommend doing this, running this like he's in absolute dire need, but he's coming off the wrong way. There's some fun little elements here in the camp as well. Your players can see that there is an encampment for goats here. Majority of the goats have died due to malnourishment and sickness. There is watchtowers that are constantly being manned by weary guards. There is a field hospital tent that is completely booked up by people that are either physically injured or have some type of disease. And your players can try and help out with any maladies there. The commander's tent has Niles Breakbone's information, all that fun stuff in it. The soldiers' tents are waterlogged and miserable, caked in mud, and leading to trench foot and other various things. and the latrines over here. Um, the latrines, they because of the constant rain, they just make the place just smell, and it's just awful. As well as the constant attacks, constantly, striking this place. Outside of Camp Vengeance, there is a stockpile of bodies, whether undead or dinosaurs or various other things, that they constantly have to burn because they don't want to have disease spreading even more. How does Camp Vengeance fit into your game? Well, it really comes down to how you want to present Denial's Breakbone, how you want to present the Order of the Gauntlet, and if you want this to be used for future use. Me personally, I would recommend running Niles Breakbone as this combative guy that needs help, but then once help is met and once things fall into order, that this place can become a forward operating base for future adventures into Chult. If your players become a bit more aggressive and don't want to handle this, then maybe this place is closed off to them, and maybe they lose out on gaining the benefits of having a place to stop and relax at. In addition, if your players make friends with some of the encampments peoples, or they make friends with Undril Silvertusk, that leads to further role-playing engagements as well. I think making this a reoccurring place for your players to come back to is certainly a worthwhile endeavor, and I would strongly recommend that you look into that.